Episode 3. Smooth Talker. Some people can tell when they are dreaming, more than others, some even to a degree known as lucid dreaming. Pierre Havelock, formerly known as Jem Havelair, is not one of these people. In fact, Pierre doesn't dream that often at all. Well, logically he knows he must dream quite a lot, we almost all do. But despite a notepad at his bedside for scribbling down any dreams he does remember having, said notepad lays almost completely empty. Today, however, would mark the end of this. Sir Havelair, where are you, man? Came the faint shouts of a soft-spoken but commanding voice. Sir Havelair sat atop a small wooden stool in a cramped, cheap, wood-lined room, eyebrow raised towards the others who heard this strange interruption coming from the hallway. The low-ceilinged door to the room flew open, and with a flourish, a few moments later, "There you are!" The same voice barked in through the door and strode across a woman in her early 20s, her hair a beautiful shade of chestnut brown, flowing behind her shoulders as her red-tinted eyes stared intently at her prey. Havelair rose his youthful but calloused hands in some sort of faux surrender. "Here I am indeed, my lady. Is something the matter?" The young lady scrunched her face indignantly, glancing around the room to observe her audience of 4. Aside from the cheekily grinning face of Sir Havelair, she was also greeted by the rest of her current travelling party. Her manservant, a small sheepish slip of a man with shaggy blonde hair. Second, a monstrously tall woman with a ridiculously large broadsword affixed to her back. And finally, a more regular-sized man with a hairline covering over his eyes and a bow of the finest making by his side. The lady hesitated for a moment on whether to continue with this captive audience watching before speaking once again. "What I want to know is why exactly you have been transpiring behind my back, in contact with my father, no less." Havelair frowned a little at this assertion, simply shrugging his shoulders. To his side, the tall woman sighed ruefully. "What have you done now, Sir Havelair?" "I really don't know this time," the man himself tried to say before being once more rudely cut off by the girl with the beautiful hair. "Don't know, Then I shall read it right now. The letter I found in your quarters, no less. Ha!" And with that she began to read from a piece of letter-sized parchment in one hand. "To your grace, my king, I write only in response to your own letter to say that perhaps a story is in order. It is no doubt true that one does not fix the finest diamond to the sharpest weapon, that such precious stones are to be made permanently beautiful, within jewellery, or at the very least made into such fine weapons as to be hung upon a wall in the court of royalty. Indeed, one does not pluck the single beautiful blossoming flower from a barren field carelessly, and no doubt your daughter is the most magnificent of flowers, the most shining of jewels. Well, Havelair, what say you in your defence of this, you traitorous scoundrel?" the woman finished, her face a picture of hurt and betrayal from the dramatic reading of the words. To her side, the young manservant with the moppy hair, leaned close to the bowman with the permanent scowl. "I do not understand why Our Lady is so mad. Was he not complimenting her?" the boy asked. The bowman laughed crookedly in response. "Perhaps, but it was not his words that have offended her, but their meaning. The king wishes for Our Lady to cease her adventuring ways, and now our resident knight offers his highness license to demand her return by recommendation of her own retainers," he exclaimed with a questioning glance in Sir Havelair's direction. Rather than form excuses, the so-called knight simply shrugged a second time. "I meant no harm by it. May I ask, have you read the back yet, my lady?" The young woman, still standing in the low doorway, slowly turned the tin parchment around to reveal further writing. Somewhat more quietly she began to read from it aloud, her face going from one ready to further chew out her servants to one of abject embarrassment. "And yet, my lord, although it may not be my place to say as such, does the craftsman who constructs such jewellery not need tools of a higher brand? Is not a chisel tipped with the finest diamond needed to make true ornaments? Are the strongest blades and arrow tips not forged from those strange, same rarest of metals? The very sword by my side, as gifted to me by your highness on the day of my royal oath, is it not made of the rarest of all metals, Magite? Is it not therefore so that your daughter, greatest of blossoms, is also capable of being the greatest blade? Is it not then that I beseech my lord not to further proposition me to speak with your daughter? For my lady, who stands the lone blossom in the barren field, must surely be the most beautiful and most deadly of all weapons. and I doubt if any man, you or I, could ever temper that most magnificent of edges. As she finished reading the last words, the young lady's face caught alight in a flush of bright crimson, hotter than any sun. I had left that on my table, out of indecision, milady. If my words were too vulgar, I feared they might trouble your father into further harshness towards you, on account of my possible arrogance, Sir Havler said with a loose wave of his hand. The lady stared down at her feet in silence, the other three occupants of the room clapping, half sarcastically and half in earnest. That's us, Sir Havler, for you. What can you expect from a wannabe storyteller? Laughed the tall woman. Quite the smooth talker, isn't he? Sneered the bowman. I think it's sweet, half muttered the also blushing manservant. Sir Havler hopped to his feet and began to make his way over to the still silently blushing woman. His hand reached for her shoulder. I hope I haven't upset you, my lady. I apologize if it seems in any way crass what I have said. Pierre sat up in his bed, slowly rubbing the sleep from his eyes. It had not been a nightmare or a sudden awakening, no, instead the light of daybreak flooded gently through the half-open curtain, and a small bird chirped playfully on the windowsill outside. He reached over calmly to his notepad and began to write down the details of the dream. Did that actually happen years ago, or was it a confused memory? He lamented, trying to write down all the details with haste. I haven't had a dream about my time with her in years. What was she wearing? Ardig, what was she wearing, for God's sake, man? Her hair, yes. Her hair was definitely brown and her eyes red. That much at least is clear. What was she wearing? Was she pronounced, or did she wear heavy armour like Mocka suggested? Could the dream be affected by Mocka's presence here? Could my memories be changing, bending around her? Trying to remember dreams is a funny thing. The more you try to force it, the more they seep away, like attempting to cup water in your palms. An old quote of Harold Pinter's about the fallibility of memories floated unwelcomingly across Pierre's mind. He tapped his pen against the paper impatiently, attempting to squeeze out as many details as possible, as many as could give him clues towards the girl calling herself Maka, the girl currently living in his house. Pierre, you're late for breakfast. You coming down? You promised we were going to walk today, my good man. Remember? A kind and warm voice from another room in the house. Pierre sighed, laying down the notepad with barely a line or two written in it, the dream now dissipating like smoke. Then again, it had also been years since anyone had called him for breakfast. Maybe it's not so bad having her here after all.